Welcome to Circle Sanctuary Network Podcasts, brought to you by Circle Sanctuary, one of the oldest nature spirituality churches in the United States, connecting people of nature-centered paths around the world. Join us through the week for a variety of shows discussing various topics, celebrating the divine in all of its forms, through nature worship, rituals, education, and building bridges of community.
Good evening, good morning, good night, good second breakfast, whenever you are, wherever you are. My name is Laura Gonzalez, and I'd like to welcome you to Lunatic Mondays, Lunes, Lunáticos, the very first bilingual show for CSNP, the Circle Sanctuary Network podcast. And tonight, I have a guest that I'm very happy to have here tonight, Jaime Gironés. He's from Mexico City, mi compatriota. He was born in 1989. He has followed the Wiccan path since he was 13 years old. He writes about spirituality, magic, minority religions, myths, and witchcraft, focusing on Mexico and Latin America, focusing on Mexico and Latin America. He works in customer service and social media. He collaborates as an international columnist for The Wild Hunt, a daily news site for pagans, heathens, Wiccans, witches, and polytheists. And of course, he is an author, and he wrote a book that, of course, I am crazy about, which is Llewellyn's little book of the Day of the Dead. But welcome, Jaime. How are you tonight?
Thank you, Laura, and thank you for having me here. I'm very well. Thank you. How about you?
I'm good. I'm excited about this interview, and I have to ask you what I ask all my guests on every show. Being a Mexican, right? How did you find your path into paganism? You started very young. You was 13 years old. So how did you get yourself into Wicca?
Okay, well, I had the blessing, I consider it a blessing, that I grew up in a very open-minded family, and my father always pushed me or inspired me to explore my spirituality. Although I was raised Catholic or in a Catholic family, my father was into esoteric and occultism topics when he was young. And so he always pushed me to explore my spirituality. And for example, he bought me my first tarot deck, and he bought me books. And I think that one day I found a book about Wicca and witchcraft, and I felt that was what have always felt or believed, or that matched my beliefs, and that's how I got into paganism and Wicca.
Very good. It's really funny, and this is a joke that I always make, and I always tell people I can make this joke because I'm Mexican. You cannot make the joke if you're not Mexican. Mexico is the most pagan country in the world, but don't tell the Mexicans because they think they're Catholics, right? I mean, I believe that the Catholicism that is practiced in Mexico is very pagan. Don't you think that? What will your opinion be, especially because you're from Mexico City like me, so we have a very similar experience.
Totally. Our practices are, first of all, are for syncretism, because of our origin and our history in our land and across the diversity of Mexico. And you can see that with the Virgen de Guadalupe every year. Is the biggest Catholic movement of the world, and it comes from people worshiping the goddess Tonantzin. And yeah, you can. The most Catholic person can sometimes say, "Oh, I bought a candle for this or that, or I put this saint upside down for the saint to help me," or like you hear so many magical practices mixed with their beliefs.
Exactly. And I think the richness and the diversity, as you say, the diversity of Mexico as a whole, you know, I was recently, I look at one of these memes that people put on Facebook and whatnot, and is the map of Mexico, you know, the little cornucopia with the belly, and they overimposed Europe and England and Europe, and they fit in Mexico, you know. Mexico is huge, and there are so many influences of different practices, and as you say very eloquently, the worship of Tonatzin. And I believe, growing up in Mexico, that they might be people who are good devout Catholics, but everybody, whether you're Catholic or not, everybody follows Tonatzin, everybody follows the Virgin of Guadalupe, you know?
Well, yeah, actually, when in 2010, the population census, the number of Virgen de Guadalupe worshippers or devotees was higher than the atheists. There were people that considered themselves atheists and still believe in La Virgen de Guadalupe. So that is crazy. La Virgen de Guadalupe goes beyond Catholicism.
Yeah. And it is no wonder, as a priestess of the goddess myself, seeing that huge movement with the Guadalupana, you know, the Virgin of Guadalupe, how a lot of practitioners of the goddess movement or the goddess tradition or goddess religions have adopted her as what she rightfully is, which is the image of Tonatzin, our great mother, Coatlicue, or, you know, I mean, she's seen by so many different names and forms, but is nonetheless the goddess. There she is right behind me. The glare is such that you cannot see her. For those who can't see, because I have to disclaimer, we are recording, we are pre-recording because our schedules are really tight, and we're not going to say when, but we are pre-recording, and we are able to do video. So for those who have the ability to see the video, there she is, Coatlicue. But what we're talking about is the Virgin of Guadalupe, right? The Catholicized image of it. But enough about that, because I mean, she is so present in everybody's life, and you cannot be Mexican without having her in your life and see her some way or another. You were talking about syncretism, and boy, oh boy, is Day of the Dead the champion of syncretism. I love the book. I'm not going to talk about the book yet. I want to talk about how was the path to get to write this book, because it's like, what? Llewellyn is going to have a book on Day of the Dead. How did that happen?
Well, it's a bit crazy for me, actually. 7 years ago, I started writing for the Wild Hunt, which is an international news website for pagans, polytheists, Wiccan witches, and I didn't see myself as a writer. I just followed the Wild Hunt as a reader, and one time I wrote an email to them saying, hey, here's a crazy idea. How about it if I translate for you some of your articles for the people that speak Spanish to read, for the Latin American community, for the Mexico community? And they replied to me right away, and they told me it's actually not a crazy idea. We've been looking for someone. Do you write? Send us something. And I sent something that I had written before, and that's how I started the Wild Hunt. So I've been writing for the Wild Hunt. I think it's already 7 years, and maybe less, but sorry. So from the Wild Hunt, my previous editor, Heather Green, that now it's an editor at Llewellyn, told me they wanted to have a book about the Day of the Dead. And she knew that it was a topic that I am passionate about. And she told me if I would be interested, and I immediately said yes. And I love the Day of the Dead since I was a child. And many months later, here we are. And I don't know, it's crazy. It was never in my plans to write a book.
It is beautiful, and it is certainly a moment of pride as a Mexican, as a Chilanga, you know, as a person from Mexico City. Don't repeat the word Chilanga. Don't say it. That's what we call ourselves in Mexico, or they call us people from Mexico City, Chilangos. There's a whole controversy about it. You don't want to know. Anyway, let me backtrack myself. I get excited because you're from Mexico City, and I don't get to talk to a lot of people from Mexico City, you know, so I get really excited about it. To see a person from Mexico City, in an international, very renowned, well-known publisher such as Llewellyn, and then writing this book about this topic that is the Mexican distinctive topic, which is Day of the Dead. And I am just slightly obsessed about Day of the Dead, you know, 36 years researching, teaching, and learning about it. And then to see this wonderful book that is hot off the press. It was released on October 8th. Was it?
Was released on September 8th. Early 8th. September, yeah.
September 8th. So it's a little bit about a month and a half out. And I invite you all to go to Llewellyn website and get it. Llewellyn's Little Book of the Day of the Dead by Jaime Gironés. And it is a delight. I love, love, love it. When did you discover, this is a silly question because being Mexican, I know there's not a time when you discover Day of the Dead, but how did you get so into Day of the Dead?
Yeah, it's a complex question because I grew up involved with the Day of the Dead. It's like asking a Catholic family, how did you discover Christmas? Just as my family set up a Christmas tree every year, we also set up a Day of the Day altar. So it's been in my life since I was a child. But if I had to say when, I would say in my kindergarten or preschool years, because the founder and director of my school used to set up a huge Day of the Dead altar, and she would invite all of the people in the school to come to the altar, and she would give each of us a Day of the Dead bread, un pan de muerto. And I think that's when, I don't know, I started loving the Day of the Dead, and it was also like a loving or warm tradition because she would give us a pan de muerto, and she would also give us a hug, and she would inspire us to remember the dead and be inspired by the Day of the Dead.
Yeah, I think it's people don't understand, you know, a lot of people don't understand. As you said, they give you the bread and then they give you a hug because it is a celebration of life. It is a celebration of connection, and it is about honoring the ancestors, not only, but honoring the family. And it's about love. It is about love. It is.
It definitely is. It's about, I would say, everlasting love. That even when our dead loved ones are not here with us anymore, or our ancestors are not physically with us, the love still exists, and we celebrate that love. We celebrate that life through love.
I love it. I love it. So one of the differences that I notice being on this side of the border, being in the United States, is witchcraft is as varied as and diverse as any other thing in life, right? And there are so many ways of honoring the ancestors. But one of the biggest differences that I noticed, and I love how you put the reason why on your book, is for us Mexicans, yeah, we work with ancestors, but we don't work with the ancestors every day. And there are other ways of witchcraft and practices. Where I have noticed more is on the Afro-Caribbean or the African diaspora traditions, where they are constantly working with the ancestors, and it's kind of like a daily thing. But for us, it's really a seasonal thing because it has to do with the seasons. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, so it is in fact more related to seasons in Mexico. However, for me, in my experience, like I was always raised to think of our ancestors and our grandmothers. So for me, it's a more common experience. But when I wanted to talk about ancestors in my book, I wanted to explain why first of all, the Day of the Dead happens, or why are the ancestors? So I included it as seasonal. I included ancestor worship being seasonal because the Day of the Dead happens at this time of the year because it's when the rainy season is coming to an end and it's the time of the harvest. So it's a time to celebrate this harvest and to express your gratitude with the divine, however you name it, but also to your ancestors for their blessing, in helping this harvest be or exist. But also sharing this blessing with your ancestors. It's a time from scarcity to abundance, and you're sharing this abundance with them. You're remembering them, but you're also, sharing what you have accomplished or your harvest with them. And the counterpart of the Day of the Dead, which is not widely known, it's called the Feast of the La Santa Cruz or Saint Cross, which is around late April, start of May. It is, although it's a Catholic tradition, it's also full of syncretism, and it is counterpart, and its origin also comes from ancestor worshipping. It's the start of the rainy season, and it's a time when it is asked as well to the divine and to the ancestors for the blessing to have a good rainy season. They ask literally for rain. So when it comes the harvest, you think about that counterpart, that those ancestors that helped the harvest come to be through the rainy season.
Of course. And then coming from a Catholic point of view, of course, the Catholicism that came to Mexico in the 1500s and later on, it was already heavily infused with pagan traditions from Europe. And it has always fascinated me how the Santa Cruz or the Holy Cross Day, which, as you say, the beginning of May, is the cross crowned with a wreath of flowers, which is very, very similar to the maypole.
Yeah, it is.
Right? It is the pole and the crown of flowers, which is a very graphic representation of fertility, right? So I love that you talk about all that on the book, and the ancestry and the pre-colonial, pre-Hispanic influence of the Day of the Dead. But I was also, there is one thing that I'm thankful about in my life, because even though I'm psychic and I check a lot of the psychic boxes, I don't have that ability that all your family has to see the dead and to I can feel their presence, but I cannot see them. Like you tell us in the book how you and your family is that scary?
Well, yeah, I talk a bit about my relationship with death and that how it comes with my family. First of all, it's not that in my way of seeing the death, I do not see the death like right here. It's more like I dream or I sense the death often, and it's not. It has never been scary for me. Although, for example, my sisters or my siblings also, some of them do consider it scary and try not to be connected with that world. But I found it confusing at first. Like when I started having dreams of or strong sense or feelings that someone was about to die, or when I used to dream when I dreamed about dead family members, like that was a confusing part of my life through my childhood or teenage years on how to make sense of it or how to live with it.
Mm-hmm. And how did you learn to live with it? Because I can understand very clearly, you know, how me being a psychic and like knowing when things are going to happen and what is going to happen. Like when things happen, I'm like, yeah, I knew it. It came to me before, like I knew it, this was going to happen. It was really bad in my teenage years when my boyfriends used to cheat on me because I'm like, I know you're cheating, like you don't have to lie. So being a psychic, I'm used to it because it's natural for me versus people who say it's supernatural. So how do you make peace now that you're used to it, now that you have made peace with it? Is there a way to like understand it better? How do you make peace with it? And could that be the reason why you're so into the other day?
Yeah, it's definitely part of the reason why I'm so into Dead of the Dead. The Dead of the Dead helped me. It probably helped me giving it a framework or how to approach the relationship. But it also, like, it sounds corny, but I think it helped, or it stopped being confusing or difficult when I learned that the process needs to come from love. And if I'm dreaming with a family member or I don't know, I'm feeling something, my reaction has to come from love on how to act on it. And it also helped to learn the moments on when and who to speak this about. During my teenage years, I would tell a teacher, I couldn't concentrate because your dad is next to you and he told me this or that. And I later learned, like, even when I sense or see things, it's not always needed to express it, and you learn when or how to do it.
With whom?
With whom. It's something that I actually rarely speak about. It's just that with this book, with the interview, that it's a good moment to share it, but it's not something that I go through life talking about.
Yeah, no, you can't because I get it, you know. I'm also like, when I see things about people, like, unless it's the right moment. And this will resonate with people that were at Samhain 2019 at Circle. If y'all remember, I stopped some people to deliver messages because they didn't get any messages for me, but I got messages from people randomly, and I didn't know who the message was for until I saw the person, and I'm like, oh, this message is for you. It is so fascinating, you know, that it is not about being scary. And people, you know, because people say, they even put it in a movie, you know, what's with Mexicans and the dead? Like, we are obsessed with the dead. But it is a celebration of life, and it is a celebration of love. So it's more like we are obsessed with love and life and partying. And speaking of partying, you guide us through party, the altar, and everything in the book. Thank you for doing that. What is your take on appropriation? I know you touch on it on the book, and I have to ask, I have to hear it from you.
Yes, I talked in my book about cultural appropriation and its difference with cultural appreciation, because I'm speaking about a celebration or tradition that it's Mexican, but also a very diverse celebration that its origin comes from indigenous communities. So it's not my intention to share a book, through my book, share the Day of the Dead as everyone in the world celebrating these specific traditions or way of celebrating. I talk about the cultural appropriation because for me, the difference with appreciation is finding the context and the background on where a celebration comes from and how it can inspire your life. And with my book, I want to inspire the world and the reader why we celebrate the Day of the Dead, where it comes from, and how you can learn from it in order to honor your ancestors and your dead loved ones, remember your dead loved ones, and also how to go maybe through your processes with death. Because celebrating our ancestors, worshiping our ancestors, remembering our dead loved ones, it's a universal activity. It's not a Mexican activity. And there are celebrations related to death around the world, which I mentioned in my book, but well, I mentioned some of them, not all of them, but it's a universal activity. And I wanted to share the Day of the Dead and how you can learn from it or be inspired by it. For example, I talk about the cempasúchil flower, the marigold flower that we use in the Day of the Dead. And I talk why we use the cempasúchil flower. It's abundant at this time of the year because it's harvested during this time of year. It has a yellow orange strong color, which could be like related to life. And it has a very sweet smell. So when I speak about using flowers as an offrenda, as an offering to your dead loved ones or ancestors, how you can look in your area that you live at for flowers that are abundant at that time of year, that have a sweet smell. So that's how I approach cultural appropriation in my book.
Of course. And I think, it's really important that we as Mexicans, right? Because you and I as Mexicans, we don't speak for all of Mexico, right? Some people will be like, oh yeah, take it. And some people will be like, no, get your hands off my Day of the Dead. And I think ultimately the understanding is that all these holidays, a holiday such emblematic as Day of the Dead, it also evolves, because we have, as you mentioned, the parade now that was actually inspired by Hollywood. And we have in this book, I was really pleasantly surprised to see that you did a prayer that kind of combines paganism with Day of the Dead, which is not traditional, but it can be done. I should know a little about that because that's exactly how I practice my paganism, with a combination of like indigenous and then Wiccan and then Mexican folk magic. So how did you get inspired to write this prayer in a, say, Wiccan or pagan way?
Yeah, right. So like similar to what you mentioned, we cannot speak of Mexico or Mexicans generalizing. Like even if you are speaking about Mexican pagans or about the Day of the Dead, you cannot generalize. And the Day of the Dead, like I said, is a very diverse celebration. So I didn't want to explain the Day of the Dead as this is it and that's it. That's the Day of the Dead. No, I wanted to explain that it's a very diverse celebration and it's celebrated differently if you go to the northern states of the country, if you go to the southeast states or in the center states. It is celebrated so differently in each area, indigenous community. And also, it is a celebration, a living celebration that it's mixed, or it mingles with other traditions, like the population in the US probably is more related to Halloween, or it has a relationship with Halloween. Just like here, a lot of people also celebrate Halloween, so you can see symbols of Halloween and the Day of the Dead mixed. And the Day of the Dead also goes beyond your beliefs. You don't have to be a Catholic to celebrate the Day of the Dead. A lot of people celebrate it even when they don't believe in anything. So in my book, I explain where I come from and my background, and I share some activities on how to celebrate the Day of the Dead, and meditation or more spiritual practices. I explain that they come from my experience, and I wanted to share how I approach the Day of the Dead, because I didn't want to speak on behalf of someone else or generalize how it's celebrated. And when doing that, I also share it as a template or as a framework. For example, that I use goddess as an example. When I use goddess as you can also refer to the divine, to God, to the universe, or to whatever you call it. So I use it as a framework, but to help people how to approach the Day of the Dead, no matter what their beliefs are.
I love it. I love how you approach everything. I love that you mentioned the activities, because there are activities throughout the book, and these are things that you can do at home. It really is a wonderful book. I will invite everybody to get it. The Llewellyn's Little Book of Day of the Dead by Jaime Gironés. My compatriota, my chilango compadre. And I have to ask you, we all know this, but I have to ask you, where can people buy your book?
You can find it in your local favorite bookstore. And if not, you can also go to llewellyn.com, or also through famous online bookstores like Amazon.
Of course, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and wherever the Llewellyn books are sold. And all I have to say, Jaime, is thank you so much for being on the show tonight, for bringing your very personal style into this holiday. I think is very valuable. I really like it a lot. I think there is a great value in this is how you do it, but this is why you do it this way, because it is important for people to understand why certain things go on the altar, why certain things don't go on the altar, etc., etc. I'm not going to tell you what the book says. You're going to find, you got to buy the book. But thank you so much, Jaime, for being here. And all I have to do just to say goodbye is leave you the microphones so you can say goodbye to your audience.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Laura, for the time and invitation, for the nice conversation, and thank you to everyone that is listening. And I hope you buy the book, and I hope you like it.
There you go. And I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful celebration, a great Day of the Dead, a very blessed Samhain, a very, very happy, spooky, and mischievous Halloween. And until next time, never forget that you are loved. Bye-bye.
And thank you for joining us on the Circle Sanctuary Network podcasts, presented by Circle Sanctuary and produced for all who follow the Nature Center paths. Join us here throughout the week for various programming connecting the community around the world. And please don't forget to watch for updates on the Circle Sanctuary website at www.circlesanctuary.org. And follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/CSN Podcasts. We can also be found on your favorite podcast hosting sites, such as iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and others. And until next time, many blessings.